Hi there. Welcome to the Luxury Meets podcast, a new kind of business podcast where we take you around the world to interview global leaders and get into their personal stories about chasing excellence across health, wellness, beauty, travel, sport, hospitality, culinary, beverage, retail, cannabis, design, and so much more. I'm your host, Jed Wexler, founder and CEO of LMCC. In this episode, I get to talk to three category-defining founders at the helm of the most influential THC-infused, non-alcoholic, and functional wellness beverage brands in the world. I talk to Jake Bullock, co-founder of Cann, Lisa Hurwitz, president of Happi, and Darnell Smith, founder of Moon. Together, we'll find out why this cultural and category phenomenon is not only here to stay, but just might be overtaking beer, wine, and big alcohol in the process. I am thrilled to present episode 4, Luxury Meets Beverage Superstars. Before we get started, I wanted to take a minute to thank our sponsor for today's episode, a very special women-owned and led all-natural hemp-derived THC-infused seltzer brand called Happi. I love this brand. Happi changed the cannabis beverage game when it debuted back in 2021 with their incredible award-winning flavors, all made with real fruit juice, 0% alcohol, and most importantly, is low dose. Happi is a collection of hemp-derived THC-infused seltzers made for any occasion, from group get-togethers, summer picnics, camping, the beach, to relaxing me time. There truly is a can for every moment. And they've created something really special just for our listeners. Visit HappiHourDrink.com. That's HAPPI hourdrink.com and use code LMCC20 for 20% off at checkout. Once again, use code LMCC20 for 20% off at checkout when you visit HappiHourDrink.com. Happi is spelled with an I. In addition to its classic flavors, Happi also has a functional line formulated for specific need states such as sleep and stress. Happi makes every moment happier. Find your Happi today. Today's episode is also brought to you by Jadestone Branding, a full-service cannabis branding and creative agency specializing in high-end luxury design. Jadestone is a woman-owned and led agency founded by Katie Mata, whose mission is to redefine the luxury cannabis market through unparalleled design excellence. Their work is honestly stunningly beautiful and effective. I've seen it firsthand, with a must-see portfolio that speaks for itself and which stands out as a beacon of sophistication and innovation. Clients include best-in-class brands from industries as varied as cannabis and CBD, beauty, skincare, and wellness, as well as lifestyle. Jadestone only accepts a limited number of client projects per quarter to ensure the highest quality deliverables to all of their clients. So visit jadestonebranding.com/LMCC now to begin the application process of becoming a Jadestone client yourself. Once again, that's jadestonebranding.com/LMCC. As you can imagine, they get booked quickly, so don't delay. Jadestone is the agency that knows how to make your brand unforgettable, irresistible, and impossible to ignore. I am thrilled to present episode 4, Luxury Meets Beverage Superstars. Welcome to the Luxury Meets podcast. I'm so excited to present our next guest. He's the co-founder and CEO of Cann. Since launching in 2019, Cann has become the #1 best-selling THC-infused beverage brand in the world, with well over 10 million cans sold in what is projected now to be an $8 billion global market within the next decade. They're backed by Gwyneth Paltrow, Kate Hudson, Rosario Dawson, so many others, and they recently won Food and Wine Magazine's 2023 Drink Innovator of the Year Award, regardless of category, which definitely says something about what this brand is doing. They're really reshaping social drinking with their microdosed non-alcoholic beverages and transforming the mainstream beverage space and ushering in a whole new era of social drinking around wellness and advocacy. Please welcome Jake Bullock, co-founder and CEO of Cann. Jake, thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
So what is the story of Cann? I know you might answer this a lot, but for our audience that might be new to you, how and why did you start the brand? What is the story?
Really started thinking about the idea behind Cann, as I was getting older. I sort of, drank a lot of alcohol in my 20s, and it became clear to me that I could not continue to do that into my 30s, experiencing sort of these debilitating multi-day hangovers, which most folks just sort of, had to deal with. Maybe you drank less, maybe you went out less, you weren't as social. And for me, that wasn't really an option. I wanted to have it both ways. I wanted to continue to be as social. I wanted to spend time with friends. I wanted to be in these environments which are so alcohol dominated, but I didn't want to have to feel like I need to drink the alcohol to do that. And there were some options that were available to folks. You could get kind of, you know, um, really up and energized by caffeine, or various other stimulants, which were in energy drinks and things like that. But there was really nothing that tried to approach the buzz you get from alcohol, without the negative effects. And I had grown up in Colorado, and I had watched the early legalization of cannabis in that state and how they approached it, dispensary market, recreational cannabis products. And for me, I thought that was really interesting, and I wondered, could there be something here with this plant? And I wasn't really a smoker. I think that helped, because I don't think a smoker could have started this product, because they wouldn't have necessarily at the beginning gotten why someone would want a drink that was only 2 milligrams of THC, 4 milligrams of CBD. It feels like just not that much. But that was a really important insight that we had when we started the company, was if you made the products really, really mild, they would start to approximate alcohol more in how you drank them, how the body metabolized it, the feeling, the effect. It wasn't about getting high. It was about capturing that sort of mild buzz, that light, gentle floatiness, which we love about THC, into a drink. And drinks are important because that's how we socialize, whether it's caffeine or alcohol, other mild intoxicants. We drink them, and so that was really the genesis. Could we figure out a way to manage that sort of negative effects of alcohol, but keep all the good stuff we liked, the buzz?
Now, flash forward to today, and this dovetails really well with the non-alcoholic beverage movement that's happening. And we know now that social connections and going out and being able to have these drinkable moments, social moments with your friends, coworkers, are a pillar of wellness. Do you see this continue to transform how people do come together socially? And just to go back to Dry January, this seems like it's been really taking a bite out of alcohol sales. Also, to your point, it must be this validation, because January alcohol sales declined by 52% as people replaced it with other options, including cannabis. You know, what has this done to us coming together?
Yeah. We really sit at this intersection of sober curiosity and canna curiosity. And each dry January, as you mentioned, culminating with this most recent one, we've seen this become even more and more strong of an effect, in terms of folks' drinking habits, their desire to start the year feeling healthy. And so what that tells me is, one, we all kind of know alcohol is the worst thing that we do to our bodies. If you're making a list of how can I be more healthy in 2024, something related to alcohol is probably at the top. If not the first thing, there's probably something up there like sleep or hydration or healthy eating habits, which are tied in many cases to our alcohol consumption. So I think that's sort of the first point. We all kind of know that we're doing this to ourselves. But the reason why we do it and we endure this sort of negative series of negative health impacts is because it is so ingrained in our social culture. We are social beings. We want to come together. One of the things I joke a little bit about products like ours is there aren't, normally marketing 101 tells you don't like the same product that your parents like, that your grandparents like. But with social beverages, that's not true. Like, I may drink the same vodka that my mom drinks because her father drank it. And that's because there's something about social beverages that is about connectivity, about bringing us together, about experiences with friends and family, memories. It's all tied up into life. And for so long, alcohol was really the only option. And so it's so associated with all of those things. What we're starting to see now is as other options emerge, even though they're really small and no one really knows we exist, right? You're starting to see that chip away at people's drinking habits, changing their drinking habits in favor of other products that might deliver that buzz, but not have some of the negative effects. We're not going to stop coming together. And what's exciting to me, and when we started this company, was the idea that in providing these options, it's just another option. Our best drinkers are alcohol drinkers. They also drink Cann, but it gives them the choice and the opportunity to maybe be a little bit better than they would have been otherwise. Maybe they show up to that social interaction with a friend or a family member and they're a little bit more of themselves. Alcohol kind of lowers our inhibitions and sometimes makes us, behave in ways that we look at back the next day saying, oh gosh, I wish I didn't do that. Now who do I have to go apologize to? And one of the upshots is that maybe with our product, you don't have to do that. You're a little bit better.
Well, speaking of that, in our earlier episode, we had an editors roundtable and we talked about this, and they each said, let's talk about harm reduction. And I think it's this negative thing that can sometimes happen, and in addition to this social piece, there is this harm reduction element that does contribute to this category and what you're doing in kind of a wellness way, no?
Yes, definitely. I think harm reduction is such an interesting lens to look at what we're doing because you have, on one hand, we're coming out of the cannabis legalization movement. And, the most people today in consuming cannabis smoke it or vape it. And we don't really know. I mean, we know that smoking is not good for you. We suspect that vaping is not either. We don't really know which is worse, but they can't be good. And so we came up in that world where we said, well, this is definitely a healthier way of doing it. And because we put such a small amount of THC, I mean, potency is really the thing that you want to be careful about as a new consumer looking at cannabis products. And so we come in at the lowest possible potency levels. And so that's in that way, it's really a harm reduction approach to the endemic cannabis world. But then you bring up alcohol, which is even more interesting because we see in our data, our drinkers over index on alcohol. So an average Cann drinker started out drinking sometimes 2, 3, 5 times the average drinks of alcohol per week. When they find products like ours, they come back to average. So they're still not, it's not like we get them to give up booze. That's not really our core customer. We have some of those customers, and that's great. That's a great option for those folks. But really, our best customers are drinkers, and we're getting them to reduce their alcohol consumption in some cases, drastically meaningful ways to their health. And so in that way, it's harm reduction, and it could be a way forward from even a social and policy standpoint for us to think about, well, how do we get those folks that we know that have 10, 20, in some cases more than 20 drinks a week, to kind of come back to something that's a little bit more average, a little bit healthier.
What I've seen is, speaking of bringing more consumers and customers in, you and the team have done this incredible savvy marketing using music videos, Super Bowl adjacent promotions, and you're leaning into events and experiences, and you're constantly in conversation with LGBTQ leadership, voices, and activism around that. And then you've just recently signed some really interesting, I would call them mainstream, aspiring partnerships. So I would love to hear about your approach to marketing the brand, given the challenges that cannabis-focused brands do have, and you've obviously are leading the pack in that.
Yeah, definitely. So the example I like to use is, for the early part of the company, when we were really starting out, acquiring customers for the first time, really relying on word of mouth, because as you indicate, it's very difficult to do cannabis advertising, mostly because most big advertising platforms won't allow us. They could, but they choose not to. They're afraid of ramifications. And so we were really forced to do a lot of community, event-driven, word of mouth focused marketing, and also using some of our celebrity investors and megaphones and armies that they can create and talk to get the word out. That was when we were living in this dispensary box, which was, a hard box to compete in for a number of reasons, but a small one. Now we are available for sale in a number of states across the U.S. in liquor stores, including big liquor stores like Total Wine and Spirits. Um, this is the big leagues, and we're talking about fighting for shelf space with brands like Modelo and some of the biggest beer brands, some of the biggest RTD cocktail brands like High Noon. And this is a very, very competitive space where they're spending tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars on advertising legally each year across all these platforms. They're tracking down all the talent and signing them up to deals. They're doing all these big advertising campaigns. And so, part of what we're trying to do is really think about, well, in a world where Cann's available in Tennessee and Kentucky and Texas, how do we reach those folks? They may have never even heard of us. They weren't, on Abbott Kinney when we did our first pop-up. They weren't there for the various campaigns that we've had in the past. And so it is, you mentioned the word mainstream. There's an element of that. When we started this company, our vision was that you would have the option for beer, wine, or can at every social occasion. That didn't just mean the social occasions that happened in Venice Beach or in New York City, right? It meant all of them. And in some ways, we're thinking about this problem as, well, why haven't we been more open to marketing these folks? Now, obviously, from a distribution standpoint, we weren't available. Now that we're available, we're asking ourselves those questions, and we're finding really cool avenues to do this. So you mentioned some of the marketing partnerships that we're embarking on. One that we are really excited about is with Barstool Sports. So folks that are familiar with Barstool Sports know it's this massive media platform which has a number of podcasts and media properties. And what's really cool about that is it reaches tons of people all across the U.S. and also in Canada where we're available for sale. And so, it was a really cool opportunity for us to get the word out to folks that maybe had never even heard of Cann. They're hanging out in Nashville, Tennessee, and they're like, I don't understand what is this brand? And so that's really exciting for us. Also getting out to sports fans. So folks that are watching football and hockey, we've always had like a funny kind of like tongue in cheek approach to sports. And now it's like, well, wait, some of the worst alcohol, indulgences are happening around sports, around, you're drinking 10 or 12 beers on a Sunday and then have to show up Monday morning for work. That doesn't seem very sustainable.
I mean, that's the most painful Monday like in the world.
Exactly. So
yeah.
That's a really big one. And then the other partnership I'll mention is the World Pickleball Tournament, which pickleball is just, taking the country by storm. It's kind of amazing. And it's this really cool game, which is allowing old folks and young folks and, it is really bringing people together in all these different ways. And we're still trying to figure it out exactly what's going on and why people love it. But I guarantee you're better off drinking a couple cans after your game than you are drinking a couple beers. And so that's another avenue that we have sponsoring that tournament, which goes on in a number of cities across the U.S.
And it might be premature, but are you looking at even international expansion? Because all the data points to after North America and EU, there's Asia Pacific. I mean, it might be a little premature. You probably want to focus on customer acquisition here first and nailing that. But I'm curious.
It's a great question. One of the most challenging things about a startup is focus, because when you're feeling the momentum and you've got a few things right, like we've got a good product, consumers want to drink it. That's exciting. That's hard. You sort of all these opportunities emerge. Is it new flavors? Is it new markets? Do you go international? Do you God forbid we launch gummies? There's just a million of these options, right? And you're sort of like, well, you're being pulled in so many directions, and it really raises the question of, well, what is the core? What's the brand? What are you trying to? What is our mission? What are we trying to do? And we talk a lot about changing the way people socialize, and I think it's really hard to do that if we overextend ourselves too much. I think there will be a time for international markets. I mean, we're in Canada, which is obviously an easier one culturally and geographically in terms of where it sits, but even that has been really, really hard for us. So I think, we really are focused here in the States, and, in some ways we have some time, because I would say that, all of the challenges that we face in this industry can be tied back to, pretty terrible war on drugs policies that this country drove both in the US and also internationally. So, I just hope at least that we can undo those effects in this country and nationally as well. But it's going to take some time because many of these countries followed our lead. And so we almost have to get the policy right here in America first, and indicate to others how it can work in a better way, in part because we were the ones that sort of created this problem in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And future thinking trend snapshot, do you see policy changing? Are you seeing momentum around that? And then what does that translate into? How does that translate into the category? Like, what products are you seeing? What do you hope to see in the category? What is happening? What do we need to look for between those two things?
We're seeing a lot of shifts on the policy front. We're seeing states step up and really fill a vacuum around these products, which is important, and they're doing good policy. I think often sometimes people will say, this is such an unregulated part of the industry, and in some ways it is, because there are these bad actors and they're popping up in states where there aren't regulation. But it also hides the fact that there are so many states out there really engaging with these issues, trying to do good policy, trying to think about, okay, well, where does a 2 milligram of THC, a 4 milligram CBD drink belong? Like, are we saying that should only be available in a dispensary? Are there places where it makes more sense because it's actually an alcohol alternative, and selling it along alcohol is going to help with our public safety and public health goals? A lot of regulators are looking at engaging with that policy in smart ways. But there's also a lot of regulation that still needs to happen, right? We're kind of on that edge where we say, please come in and help give us more guidance. Let's help get rid of the bad actors, right? No one should be buying 100 milligram, candy products that are ripping off the trademarks of big national brands in gas stations, in various parts of the country. That should not be happening. We all kind of, know that. And so then the question is, what is good policy? And we think that these products should be available where alcohol is sold. If you can buy beer, you should be able to buy Cann. You got to be 21. We have the responsibility to make sure that we're putting in 2 milligrams of THC, and we're clearly labeling that on the front of the can. And there's testing results to back that up, and we're putting the right warnings that the government asks us to put on. Those are all good policy pieces. I grew up in Colorado, and so we're one of the states that had a 3.2 beer, so lower ABV beer in the grocery stores. And you could buy the higher beer in the liquor store. Cann is kind of like 3.2 beer. Like, it should be available in grocery stores. The risk profile is so low because the THC is so low. One of our drinks isn't even intoxicating. You kind of have to drink a couple of them to feel the effects. And so we're having that conversation live now with a lot of states, and we ultimately hope we can have it with the federal government as well, and see the FDA step in and provide regulation in this space.
Now, is it a challenge to continue to push out this education that it is low dose, that it is harm reduced, it is an alternative that is safe when regulated? And going back to retail, you're in Total Wine, which is really like this mainstream inflection moment where you are side by side. Are there other channels that you see growth in? Is it grocery? You've been in grocery on the East Coast. Is it specialty retail? Is it more of the Total Wines just popping up and being open to doing business, depending on the regulation, and not to mention your D2C, your online, which is also thriving?
Yeah, I think like I said before, we really think about this as, if you can buy beer, you should be able to buy Cann. It's that equivalent. I mean, we'd argue that the Cann is even more mild than a one beer, and for various reasons related to alcohol and how it affects the body and the things that it does. And I think that there are a lot of different ways that this can continue to evolve. There are really interesting shops that are selling only non-alc products. We are a non-alc product. That's an interesting place to buy this, right? You're thinking about, do I pick up a bottle of non-alcoholic wine and bring it, or do I bring a 6-pack of Cann to this party? And so we're thinking about, that as an interesting channel and how that plays. Many of these big retailers, you mentioned grocery, are thinking about, well, we know consumers want non-alc product options. Is this something we can fold in? And so that's another, I think, interesting one. Again, if they're selling beer, you kind of think, well, they should be able to sell us. And part of what we want to have happen is we want consumers to be able to make that choice live in the shopping aisle. So if you're going into a dispensary, you're planning on buying a cannabis product, and you're probably planning on buying something that has 100 milligrams of THC or more. Because that's usually what the total package sizes are. And people walk out of dispensaries with like 1,000 milligrams of THC. which is wild because they're going to walk out of a liquor store or a Total Wine, with maybe 12 or 20 milligrams of THC with Cann. So it's just dramatically different in terms of the amount, the access, the amount of THC someone can purchase, and then not to mention how difficult it is to consume it. You actually have to drink all of the liquid to get the dose of our products, right? Which is not the case of some of these capsules and gummies and smaller things. So we really think that there's a lot of opportunity for these products to be sold. And we're excited to continue to offer them to consumers that are looking and really, really demanding them as they try to balance this challenge with being social and alcohol.
And last question, since this is the Luxury Meets podcast, I have to ask, how do you invite luxury into your life? What does it mean to you? Is it a product? Is it experience? Is it more free time? Is it something you do with your friends or family? And it doesn't necessarily mean a material price point or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been thinking a lot about this idea. You sort of say, okay, how do you invite luxury into your life? What are we really talking about with luxury? And I think sometimes we can go through life thinking about luxury as minimizing inconveniences. It's about sort of indulging in all of these very nice things, and the more nice things you indulge in or accumulate, the better. And the fewer inconveniences you have to suffer through, the more luxurious your life is. And I just don't really think that's right. I like to think about it more through this lens of selection. Like, you will make choices which are luxurious choices each day, and they may be small ones. They may be like going around the corner to the coffee shop to get a coffee in the morning instead of making it at home, right? But that has this sort of like special sort of luxury element to it. It may be wearing a nice watch that you would otherwise not wear, and in doing so that day, you kind of have this extra special feeling. Or you go and you come down in the morning and you see a painting which sort of affects your experience, and that painting makes your life better in that moment, and maybe it even has a halo effect that sort of carries on into the beginning of your day, which confers so much value onto you and your experience. And so, in that way, thinking about those little things that we choose to bring into our lives in different ways. Maybe it's something that you purchase or, one time or multiple times. Maybe it's really expensive, like a painting, but maybe it's very inexpensive, like a coffee, can kind of color and character your experience. And so I think about it like that, and not to shamelessly bring it back to Cann, but that is kind of what Cann's about too, right? Maybe this Friday night, you're going to have a couple of these, and you're going to drink the pineapple jalapeno, and it's going to be different than a margarita, but it's sort of treating yourself to this special sort of moment. And ultimately, hopefully you can enjoy it and experience life in a new way.
Perfect. Yeah, it's a special choice, these special moments that you're providing. And we'll all definitely be looking out for that pineapple jalapeno. We'll be looking out for you at some pickleball tournament game. Do they call them game?
Yes.
Anyway,
I don't know what they call them. I should know that.
Yeah. Sorry, pickleball people, please don't flood the inbox.
Exactly.
Thank you for your leadership in the space, and very excited for the future. Jake, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Jed. I enjoyed it.
So glad we had a chance to talk to Jake Bullock from Cann. Coming up next, Lisa Hurwitz, president of Happi. This is a great interview, especially how it ends. Grab your favorite infused beverage, sit back, and enjoy interview part 2. Please welcome Lisa Hurwitz, president of Happi. Happi is a women-owned and led all-natural THC-infused seltzer brand. Really part of this first wave of brands in the space since they debuted in 2021. Happi has these incredible flavor profiles, unbelievable packaging, functional ingredients that are actually formulated for specific need states such as sleep and stress, to name a few. And they have a huge and fast-growing customer base, by the way, made with 0% alcohol, low dose, and did I say award-winning? Yes, I did. Please welcome Lisa Hurwitz. Thank you for joining us. What a pleasure.
Jed, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and get to talk to you more about Happi and this incredible category.
So let's jump in. What is the story behind Happi? Like, what is your background? What compelled you to start the brand and start this kind of brand?
Yeah, so I am a marketer by background. I've been obsessed with products since I can remember. As a woman, health and wellness, beauty, fashion, everything in your world has always sort of been part of my world. I spent time working with Procter and Gamble and Kimberly Clark. I entered the cannabis space actually back in 2018 and realized just how rich this space was in terms of plant-based opportunities for women. But most dispensaries and most experiences in cannabis were really geared towards that stoner guy, right? It was an uncomfortable experience to walk into a dispensary. Everything was smokable. One of my first experiences in a dispensary in Chicago, I had a medical card before it was adult use, and I had had a lot of problems sleeping. I was an executive. I was on the plane all the time. And I got a medical card thinking, oh, cannabis can help. And I walked into a dispensary and there was a 25-year-old guy who clearly was very experienced with cannabis. And I said, I need something to sleep.
In real time, I bet too.
Yes. In real time, always. And I said, I need something to sleep. Here I am in my, early 40s at the time, late 30s with 2 young kids. And he said, oh, take an RSO. And for those of you who, your listeners who don't know an RSO, it stands for Rick Simpson oil. It's one of the most concentrated forms of cannabis. And he said, take a little bit and put it on a cracker. You'll sleep through the night. Not only did I sleep through the night, I slept for like 2 days. I had to miss work. I was just totally out. And that was the first time, Jed, that I thought to myself, wow, here's something very powerful. It's all natural. It's plant-based. But it's not in a format that is friendly for most consumers. And that's when the sort of light bulb moment went off. And I said, I need to educate myself and get into the industry. And I did. I went into the adult use space for about 3 years as the chief marketing officer of a company called Grassroots, which turned into Curaleaf. And I started Happi in early 2021 because I was really passionate about microdose and about a format that felt accessible for most people. And what a better format than a beverage, which, everybody drinks some form of beverage during the day, even if it's water. And so that's sort of the birth of Happi and how the idea was born.
No, it's fascinating. It seems like, especially now, this is a mainstream moment for the category for beverages. Do you see that now? I mean, can you talk about the market, the size of the market? And you have a huge customer base in just a handful of years, and go into your audience. You're talking about formats, and this is accessible. This isn't, I'm going to accidentally sleep for 5 nights. This is controlled, and very, specific. So maybe you can just speak to that and your audience as Happi.
Yeah, and I think there was a pivotal moment. So we began by actually selling Happi in dispensaries, and it was kind of a miss for us and for the whole beverage category because at the end of the day, the microdose consumer, the woman who wants just to take that edge off at the end of the day, or the guy who just wants to sleep well through the night, they're not necessarily going into dispensaries, and drinks are a very weird format to buy there. You would think I go into a grocery store or a liquor store, or, there's stores all across the country, and it was a mismatch. Well, that changed about 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago. Minnesota was actually the first state to essentially legalize THC beverages. Now, this doesn't matter much. It matters from a regulatory standpoint, but the THC comes from hemp. It doesn't come from the marijuana plant. It's identical in how it behaves, but that allowed beverages like Happi. So here's an example of our latest pineapple flavor. We can talk more about it, to start to be sold in places all over where you would feel comfortable, I would feel comfortable going in and buying a bottle of wine. And now all of a sudden there is a true alternative. So it's this kind of amazing cultural moment and regulatory moment happening right now in 2024, where more and more states are allowing low dose. And when I say low dose, it's usually 5 milligrams is kind of the sweet spot, sometimes under 10 beverages to be sold in stores like Total Wine and Spirits, who I was with yesterday, who are doing a phenomenal job. Or for those in Chicago, a Binny's, or those in Texas, a Specs. Like, those are the stores that are now carrying these low dose beverages. And simultaneously, culturally, people are drinking less. Since they came out of the pandemic, there's a push towards health and wellness. There's a push towards plant-based ingredients, and non-alcoholic beverages overall are growing tremendously, and categories like beer in particular are declining. And so Happi's sitting at this sweet spot of kind of this plant-based alternative beverage that still gives you a buzz. So you still feel it's not CBD. You still feel as though you're participating. If you go out to dinner with friends and they're all drinking and you say, I want to feel something, I want to feel a little loose tonight. Happi gives you that ability to do so. So there's this incredible sweet spot right now in beverages, THC beverages in particular, and the category is growing like gangbusters.
And to what you're saying, it seems like it's being seamlessly, integrated into a mainstream consumer lifestyle. We've talked about this being sessionable. This is kind of transforming how people come together socially. You don't have to be left out if you don't drink. We mentioned in a previous episode this concept of harm reduction, and all of these things, and not pushing alcohol to the side, but this seems to be integrated into an existing lifestyle. Can you speak to that, how Happi is kind of ridden and contributed to this wave?
Yeah, so I think a couple things. We talk about there's a Happi for every occasion, right? And I should share with you that the genesis behind the brand name is it's how it makes you feel happy, right? And that's really, we believe everybody deserves to be happy. We believe there's a Happi for every occasion. And so social occasions, as we've been discussing, are a big one. You want to go out and you don't want to have a drink because you don't want to be hungover the next day. You don't want to feel like crap. As you get older, and I'm in my 40s, you really feel it more, right? And so I think social occasions are a big one. Being able to, sit around, and instead of that glass of wine, you just, take a Happi, and you can have, this is actually a slightly bigger one, a 10 milligram, but it comes in multiple, sizes and flavors, and you can drink as much as you need. But I also want to talk about how cannabis is not just like alcohol. Cannabis has a wellness side to it that kind of bleeds over into the sort of functional beverage space, or what we're seeing now with the growth of plant-based mushrooms, non-psychedelic mushrooms, and functional ingredients. And, we just formulated our new pineapple with dandelion. So we're always putting together unique combinations, right? And this is the summer seasonal. And some of it is because both pineapple and dandelion are anti-inflammatories. And for summer months, when it's really hot and you want a cold beverage, but you also want something that's good for you, every time we design a product, we think about that Happi occasion that our consumer is going to be taking Happi and drinking Happi and enjoying it. And what can we do to make her feel even better? And so we do have our most popular drink is called Happi Glow. And it does have some lion's mane mushroom in it, and we have one for sleep that's got reishi mushroom. So really thinking about occasions that aren't only alcohol replacement, but are that last drink before bed to help me sleep. Or we call Glow our golden hour drink. It is that transition time between working and when you get off of work, that kind of traditional happy hour, and you just want to take the edge off your day, and it relaxes you and calms you. So really thinking about the ingredients and the occasions that people like to drink.
Well, I mean, it's become almost foundationally a health and wellness CPG category, and beverage is obviously fast growing, and to go back to this mainstream accessibility, at retail, the retailers you mentioned, this product, this category, Happi and other companies like it, are now being sold side by side in these retail shops. So you don't have to go to a dispensary, although you can, so this is really, opening it up. And, are you seeing more and more retailers like this opening up as the regulatory landscape opens up? And is that really there's a huge opportunity there?
Huge opportunity. And the answer is yes. I mean, again, consumer behavior is pretty clear. You go to either a grocery store or a liquor store or a wine shop, a bottle shop, that's where you think about buying alcohol for an occasion. And so the more these THC beverages like Happi can be sold in those stores, the more consumers start to adopt and get excited and learn. I would say the other channel that surprised us, Jed, is our direct to consumer channel. We can talk about that. We sell online and have for about 16 months. And we have 30,000 consumers in our database, of which 3/4 are women. And I think there's a very interesting psychological, it's happy hour. Happi is with an I, by the way, drink.com. And I'll mention it again at the end. But I think one of the interesting psychological components to being able to order online, first of all, e-commerce has exploded, especially since the pandemic. But I think customers are just much more used to ordering online. But there's something in this category about privacy and discretion that is really important. There's still, for some consumers, a stigma around cannabis, around weed, around just say no, and the whole 1980s Nancy Reagan era, messaging around it's bad for you and it's a drug. And we all know now that that is not the case, and that, cannabis has tremendous health and wellness benefits, and is often, much better for you than pharmaceuticals. But there's still people sometimes, for multiple reasons, they don't want to be seen with it. They don't know how they're going to react to it. They want to be able to have it in the privacy of their own home so they can sip it on the couch and really understand, how is this going to make me feel? So we have seen unbelievable growth online as well in this category, which has been pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's fascinating that, most people have no qualms about running into the grocery store, grabbing a bottle of wine or rosé for the summer and heading to whatever kind of social situation, whether it's family friendly or not. And speaking of, your audience right now leans towards women and, female consumers, as a female founder and leader yourself, where are all the women-led, diverse-led brands in this space? What are these challenges? I mean, just connecting with you really took some discovery.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? And you would think we're in 2024, and in a category as progressive and groundbreaking as cannabis, there would be more women leaders and women founders. I think there's two pieces working against the beverage space in particular. One is the majority of experienced entrepreneurs and leaders in this category, in beverage overall, alcohol, are guys, they're men. The beer industry, in particularly craft beer, that whole era was very male dominated because the end beer drinker were men. And so I think we're seeing a lot of the spillover from that. And similarly in cannabis, early adopters in cannabis, heavy cannabis users tend to be men. And therefore many of the cannabis companies were founded and started by men. So I think what's fascinating to me is that it's not only there are not enough founders in this space, there are not enough beverages that are geared towards female consumers. It's still, you see, many of my colleagues are putting these heavy duty 50 to 100 milligram beverages on the market. And I think to myself, who's going to drink that? It's too much.
It's a different experience. Are you seeing founders in the space? Is this an investor capital raise issue, or is it just more people seeing people like you be successful and being out there and being present, things like that?
Yeah. I mean, as a founder, you're always raising capital, right? I mean, we've been very, I would say, lucky, and I feel very grateful. We have incredible investors. But the other piece I would say, Jed, to it is like, I come from a consumer packaged goods background, and my business partner comes from a live entertainment background, music festivals and things like that. So the two of us operated very far outside of cannabis for a long time, and outside of beverage, outside of the beer world. So we bring that outside experience, and the way we've designed Happi, the branding, the product, it's a CPG product. I mean, it is a product that will eventually be sold in, and we already talked about this, it's already starting to be sold in, kind of key retailers. But the way consumer packaged goods companies work, right? It's about scale and marketing and formulations and innovation, and really leaning into that. And that's where we've kind of placed our bets on the brand, on unique formulations, on the marketing of it, and making sure we're really building kind of a strong community around Happi.
And, this is a great segue into your marketing plans, your marketing approach, and the products that you're launching, and how you're doing it, because you are taking this really unique outside of the space view into it. So I can imagine just how creative you can get. So, can you speak to those plans and your products?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a really exciting product roadmap. As I mentioned, we have sort of two parts of our portfolio. One is a little bit more wellness oriented and functional. So that's where we'll put in functional mushrooms. We'll play with minor cannabinoids. I think CBD is the most famous. So most of your users have heard of CBD. But there's other minor cannabinoids that are part of the plant that are non-psychoactive, that are really exciting as well. And there's cannabinoids like CBN, which has been good for sleep. We have that in our nightcap product. CBG is another one, which also is a bit more kind of an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. So really sort of testing and playing with. We have our classic part of our portfolio. We'll continue to innovate THC only, seasonal flavors, special ingredients like this pineapple dandelion I mentioned.
And note to our listeners, you will be able to get that link in our show notes and lots of other places. So don't worry, you'll be able to find it easily.
And then thinking about the roadmap on the functional side, which I'm really excited about, there's just so much to play with. We've talked about hydration. We've talked about immune boosting. We've talked about even sort of like an appetite suppressant, weight loss type opportunity, energizing for places like the gym and others. There's formulations that sort of aid in all of that. So we are laying out sort of a product roadmap now that speaks to, again, more of those happy occasions, more of those places where we feel that a cannabis beverage can fill a gap that alcohol or a traditional, other type of beverage can't. And that's what we're the most excited about.
So how do you go about scaling this consumer education so people understand this? And my kind of like a two-parter, where does hospitality, where do those kind of guest experiences, play into your plans as well?
Yeah, education is probably the most tricky part of this category. Again, there's sort of like a lot of built-in stigmas around it. And so as much as we can, we educate consumers online at our site, Happy Hour Drink. We also do education for all of our retailers and our distributors. So their staff is educated and can speak about the category. That's kind of up and coming. And then the other thing we find that gets into the sort of hospitality space is sampling. The best way, people have no idea what to expect. Is this going to taste like bong water? Is it going to,
right, still,
is it going to make me high immediately? How am I going to feel? And I would say 9 times out of 10, everyone's pleasantly surprised. Like, wow, I feel relaxed. I feel great. It's not too much. The onset, I start to feel the effects within 15 to 20 minutes, which I think is a big deal because a lot of people, most of the time, if they tell you they've had an experience with cannabis, that's not great. It's usually an edible or a smokable. And this gives them the ability, to your point earlier about sessionability. You can learn sort of where, but to date, the most effective has really been trialing. And so hospitality is great to start to be in bars, restaurants, hotels. I think we mentioned we're starting to pop up in some mini bars of hotels. That gives people the option to try it in kind of a broader setting. And again, we talk about getting Happi in hands. And once a Happi's in your hand, we see a lot of repeat consumers.
I love that. So we have a closing question. It's this mini tradition. We are Luxury Meats podcast. I want to ask, how do you invite luxury into your life? Is it products? Is it fashion you just need to have? Is it experiences? Is it art? How do you do that? How do you invite that?
I love this question, and I'm like a massive fashion and beauty junkie. I cut my teeth in Manhattan, but I'm not going to go there because to me, the biggest luxury for me as a working mom, entrepreneur, is time. And the luxury of time for me, I've really found like screen-free time, but specifically, I picked up surfing in my very early 40s during the pandemic. And there is something magical about time stopping when you're in the ocean and you're so focused on really like the next wave or the fish that's swimming by or whatever it may be. And for me, that time and the ability to surf, specifically for me, and have time in the water is my biggest luxury. I try, when I have a home in Central America, and when I'm there, I try to reserve that time at least every day, because I find that to be the most sort of resetting and luxurious experience I can have. It doesn't compare to products to me. It doesn't compare to a spa. It's really like this incredible just gift of like everything stops and you're in the ocean and you kind of recognize your place in the world. And I think there's something kind of luxurious about that.
I love that answer. It's the perfect way to close. Lisa Hurwitz, president of Happi, thank you for joining us, and can't wait to see Happi everywhere and happy people everywhere. Thanks to what you're doing. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Jed. Appreciate the time today, and I look forward to chatting again soon.
Have you been to one of our award-winning LMCC B2B events? Visit lmccshow.com now and add yourself to the waitlist to participate in our brand new global series of invite-only events connecting top retailers, editors, investors, and brands across luxury health, wellness, beauty, hospitality, culinary, sports, spa, cannabis, CBD, and so much more. LMC has been featured in Adweek, Bloomberg, Daily Beast, Forbes, Beauty Independent, and so many others, and is the only B2B event of its kind anywhere in the world. Once again, visit lmccshow.com and join our global waitlist. And now for our final interview with Darnell Smith, founder of Moon. Enjoy. Welcome, Darnell Smith, founder and CEO of Moon, which is a non-alcoholic cannabis-infused spirits brand that is evolving today's cocktail culture and disrupting the alcohol and cannabis industry. It's safe to say that Moon is leading the way in reinventing our bar carts everywhere. Moon also showcased their brand, and Darnell was a main stage speaker at one of our previous LMCC events. You're also a CPG and alcohol industry veteran, cannabis entrepreneur, and as a top consultant, Darnell's worked closely with the likes of Adidas, Ralph Lauren, AB InBev, Amex, Diageo, and Pernod Ricard. And if that wasn't enough, he received his marketing degree at Notre Dame while also playing football as a defensive end under legendary coach Lou Holtz. Wow, Darnell, welcome to the podcast. Your story is... it's pretty fascinating, and I wanted to ask you first, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Jed. It's always good to see you, my friend. And I was thinking the other day about last time we were all together at LMCC and kind of how far we've come since then. So good to be on.
And definitely the brand has come a long way. What is the story behind Moon? I mean, your background is fascinating. What was that aha moment that compelled you to start the brand, considering your deep experience?
Yeah, as you stated, I've worked quite extensively in beverage in my past, starting from commercial marketing, now known as shopper marketing, working my way up through innovation. And during that whole journey, I just kind of, kept my eye to the data and was paying attention to trends while also navigating my own relationship with alcohol, having to, come up with sample liquids, taste them at 10 a.m. Then we're out at lunch and someone might have a drink, and we're at, happy hour. We had a massive bar in our office, and then you're out at night at accounts and distributors, and you do it all, rinse, repeat, right? Every day. And, for me, it's kind of when I kind of spurred off a bit and really started having this moment of like, there has to be a different way to exist in this world. And so that's when I started making just a simple tincture. And So I'd be the guy in the bar, ordering a tonic and lime, and I'd put 3 drops of my tincture in there and turn around, and I'd be sessioning cocktails right with everyone else. And mind you, this is 15, almost 20 years ago now.
Wow.
And that was kind of like the start of it for me. So fast forward to COVID times, I randomly was making a batch of tincture, kind of dusting off some of my old hobbies. And my wife came out into the garage where I have my little benchtop science experiment place. And she's like, you know what? You need to do something with that. And I was like, do what? And her response to me was, you're supposed to be the smart one. And she turned away and walked away. And that truly was kind of maybe my first aha moment with like, maybe there is something to this. And in parallel, I didn't even think about this, but I was already working in a spirit with a client of mine who was at Bacardi at the time, who is now a business partner. And so I don't know, it's just like, it just hit me like, wait a minute.
And by NA, for our listeners, that's non-alcoholic. And, from where we sit, this is all dovetailing with this rise in the non-alcoholic beverage movement and a wellness approach. Why cannabis-infused beverages? Like, why now? I mean, this appears to be yet another very mainstream moment for this market and this category. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I just think, I always say to people, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of the domination or ownership of, the adult moment has far along been completely owned by alcohol. And I think now that cannabis has become a much more socially acceptable way to imbibe, I think it's only common sense that a beverage would now become an interesting vessel to deliver this active ingredient that rivals alcohol.
And you taking a approach to spirits. So, I mean, this customer base is growing. Who is your customer? What are you seeing, across the U.S.? What's coming back to you in the Moon team?
Yeah, broadly, I think about it from a target and a bullseye standpoint. Obviously, our target is anyone who appreciates a craft, well-made cocktail. And, that total addressable market is almost unfathomable. So, but when we drill down into like who our actual consumer is, we definitely trend female. We definitely trend, higher income bracket. It is, the 46-year-old woman in Ohio who has 2 kids, used to drink wine every night to kind of round the edges, and is looking for a different way to have that moment, but still be who they need to be the next day. So, it's a really interesting development. I mean, you get the kind of older generation who uses it for nightcaps or pain management. You get the Gen X generation that is I call them the athletic and a gummy generation, right? They're looking for ways to reduce. So it's a really, the reason why I'm so bullish on it is because the target is so vast, whereas in some spaces it's very precise. This has untold potential with multiple segments of society.
Well, that's what's so fascinating about what you're doing in the category, because it's typically been hyper targeted. Let's segment this audience. You're from a C-suite marketing background, and here is this multi-generational consumer, possibly the first category ever where it is fair game, and there is something for everyone. And speaking of that, in your category, cannabis infused beverages, there looks to be this unified lifestyle retail phenomenon happening where cannabis infused beverages just this year are being sold at select retailers across the country, side by side with beer and wine, and seriously driving beverage sales. What does that mean for the category, and what are you most excited about? What retailers are really leading the way here? What can we see from that?
Wow, that has been, anyone who's been in this industry for any amount of time will tell you that's kind of our holy grail in terms of being sold alongside other adult beverage products. So when the folks like Total Wine and more, who, full disclosure, we're working on hopefully an in with them, and we'll be on shelves there soon. But the folks like Total Wine and more, who made a decision at a corporate level to say, you know what, this is something we want to get behind. And, they started rolling it out in select states, and then it just, next thing you know, you woke up, it was nationally authorized. And so that was a massive moment for the industry. It sparked off a bunch of different debates in terms of, where should it be? Should it be in dispensaries? Uh, there's different objectives, I'll say, at play from various industries that are clashing on this mode. But it is like you said, a phenomenon, and it is really showing how big this can be and how big we expect it to be, because it is something that consumers want. And that's where the buck stops for me. Is it something that consumers want? And they certainly have shown in a very short amount of time that this is something that is highly desired.
I mean, it sounds like a resounding yes. Yeah.
Yes. And you think about other smaller regional retailers, like we're dealing with someone in Missouri, Macadoodles, or you look at other places like Texas has Specs, right? And these regional chains are also, I don't want to leave them out. They're playing a big role in this rolling out as well. In fact, that's kind of where it started, and then Total Wine kind of took it to the next level. But all that is great for us, and it's great for the category if the government can leave hemp alone.
Yes, and that leads to my next question. With this potentially massive moment, I'm starting, thinking about your business since you started, and now, what have been some of the biggest business challenges with Moon, and how do you overcome them, especially in this seems like a hot market?
Yeah, I think we just touched on the biggest one, and it's the uncertainty. It's the uncertainty on the regs, and then it leads you to have to make decisions in terms of how hedged are you going to be? Do you keep a presence in what is today considered regulated marijuana, cannabis state markets, or do you go all in on the hemp play? And it's tough, right? Because most of us, not all of us, some of us have raised a bunch of money. That wouldn't be us, but most of us have finite resources, and so you have to kind of make a decision. We have purposely stayed over our skis in the sense of, we have aimed to get to building a profitable, sitting on a strong foundation business from the start, and didn't really jump in this to say like, okay, how quick can we get to exit? Because we just knew the category lead time is way longer than to be thinking in those terms. So the people in the space now have to be thinking in terms of category building and surviving that phase of category building before you can get the big ambitions of moving elsewhere. So, I think that is the biggest challenge, is dealing with the changing legal environment. I mean, there's a amendment to the draft of the Farm Bill that I heard is being voted on probably right now in Congress, which would effectively outlaw almost THC and CBD products being sold. We don't think it's going to pass, but hey, you never know. And so dealing with that uncertainty is certainly something that you don't deal with in other. As you know, I have a non-alcoholic spirit. We don't deal with that, right? It's very cut and dry. We know our path.
So what are you hoping to see in the near future? What are you seeing, like regulations? I guess we can't even say regulations aside. Like, what is your hope? What's that trend snapshot? Because there are a lot of folks in this waiting for that to open.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that, look, I'm a big advocate of sensible regulations. I do believe there needs to be some oversight of the industry, because in any industry you're going to have bad actors, and you need to offer some level of public safety as it pertains to a category of products. So yes, I am in behind that. However, some of the arbitrary caps and limitations, and everyone's arguing over what's low dose, what's high dose, and I look at it very simply, and it's concentration. Like 100 milligrams in 2 ounces is much different than 100 milligrams in 30 ounces of liquid, and so you have to use some common sense as we work through this. But I just think if we can have sensible regulation come in without being overbearing and allow the category to flourish in a safe manner, that's what I'd like to see. I don't think this prohibitionist approach is going to work, as unfortunately some of the MSOs that aren't positioned to take advantage of the hemp movement are lobbying against the plant, which is kind of a mind twister, but it shows you how different interests can conflict. So having some sensible regulation, having some consumer protection baked in there, but without being too overbearing, and that it stifles innovation. It like limits us to a seltzer. You can only make THC seltzers. Like, we need a broader range of products than that. And the way the legislation is going now is like trying to needle us into that. And it'd be like saying to the spirits industry, you can't have a 750 ml. You can only have a 100 ml bottle. Like, that's as big as it can be. And that just seems not right for the consumer. So we're hoping for some clarity and some sensibility in the regulation.
Well, it seems like you're uniquely positioned, Darnell, with the skills that you've taken from working with some of the top non-cannabis CPG brands in the world. What have you brought to Moon to bring you to this point? What served you well?
Yeah, you make a good point. I've been super lucky to be in the positions I've been in, because I've worked on the straddle of big corporate scale, but typically working with parts of organizations that were tasked to ignore that and move faster and innovate. Right. So, right. And when you're taking those two concepts and melding them together, it creates this third thing, right? Of how do you leverage your opportunities for scale while still moving like a speedboat. You can't be a freight liner and take advantage of opportunities. So that has been really helpful for me in terms of how we've approached this business, right? I have, a strong Rolodex that I'm slowly building brick by brick to help with the scale part of it, right? But our key has been staying nimble, right? And being able to respond to you wake up one day and things are different, and that's very typical in this industry. You never know what you're going to get from like a state news perspective in terms of, this state has come out and said you can't sell hemp anymore. So there's a whole wave of things that happen when that happens. That can happen in the course of like 24 hours. So being flexible and nimble is something that, like, obviously as a startup, you have to excel at. And so that's what we focus on is, how do we keep ourselves nimble and flexible enough to not get too locked in so that we can't pivot and adjust as market dynamics change. And so we're going to continue to do that. And from product launches and form factors and things that we're working on are all in the vein of how do we navigate this uncertain climate right now, with knowing that the one thing that is for certain is that the consumer wants this, right? That's kind of like the shining beacon.
And that's obvious. Speaking of product, let's talk about your product. We talked about a lot of other things. Explain your product, the differentiation, what you're launching. Fill us in.
Yeah, so our whole product was based kind of on luxurious simplicity, right? And we wanted to create something that was very simple and turnkey for those who work with spirits already. So you have to have some confidence to go and do some analogs of things that people have experience with already, because there's a high bar, right? Like when we think about the bourbon drinker and their palates and how it's been developed over the years, it's become pretty sophisticated. So when you're working on something that is non-alcoholic but bourbon-like, right, and it's supposed to take the place of bourbon and bourbon-inspired cocktails, there's a high bar. So we spent the time to really put the care into developing our products so that when you get to the point of enjoying it, it was in fact enjoyable. Whereas I feel like, unfortunately, a fair amount of the space you had to react so quick to the opportunity that maybe the liquid quality still lags behind. And that's what I'm a proponent of is, hey guys, let's continue to all up our game, because at the end of the day, the consumer, sometimes we only get a couple shots with them, maybe one shot to get someone into this. So Moon is really just a simple approach to mixology, in the sense of saying alcohol doesn't have to be the monopolistic ingredient in a cocktail. And you can swap in Moon for any cocktail recipe that you know and love that uses gin, bourbon, tequila, and hot off the press, our white rum that's coming out this summer. So you can imagine all the cocktails that you don't even have to think about when you want to recreate it without alcohol, but with some fun in the glass. And so that's what we've been up to. And we've gone back and forth on the ready to drink piece, and for the listeners out there, like the biggest part of this category right now is seltzers, hard seltzers, is, I guess if you want to call them that, and pre-mixed drinks, right? Spirits are still kind of on the up and coming, because it's just how society is right now. We look for convenience, right? And so the RTD category. But for us, we didn't want to just come out and do it like everyone else is doing it. Like, we really wanted to hold true to our mission of delivering an ultra premium experience. And so I think people are going to be excited to see what we've come up with. I won't get too much more into it, but just know something fun and delicious is coming on that side from us as well.
Well, Darnell, we appreciate you creating these luxurious moments, and I want to end with somewhat of a personal question. It's a tradition, a new tradition. Question: how do you invite luxury into your life? Is it products? Is it these moments? Is it friends? Is it more time? Would love to know your approach.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, it's a few pronged, right? One is just to take self-care, treating yourself the best, right? And that's the position luxury has always played for me, is like making sure I take care of myself, because if I can't take care of myself, who am I to other people? So that's always been a way, but it's also for me like a function of time. Like, I've always been this person to like, who owns my time? Do I own it, or does someone else own it? And to me, the biggest luxury in the world is ownership of your own time. And so that's how I look at it.
Beautifully said. Darnell Smith, founder and CEO of Moon. It's been a real pleasure having you on the LMCC podcast. Look for Moon everywhere. It'll change how you look at the category. Thank you so much, Darnell.
Thanks for having me, Jed.
A big thank you once again to our guests for this episode, Jake Bullock from Cann, Lisa Hurwitz from Happi, and Darnell Smith from Moon. I highly recommend you follow each of them on LinkedIn, and of course, all across social. Trust me, your bar cart will literally never be the same in a great way. You can find all their info in our show notes as well. I also want to take this time to thank Jadestone Branding for supporting today's episode. Jadestone Branding is a full-service cannabis branding and creative agency specializing in high-end luxury design. Clients include best-in-class brands from industries as varied as cannabis and CBD, beauty, skincare, and wellness, as well as lifestyle. Jadestone only accepts a limited number of clients per quarter, so visit jadestonebranding.com/LMCC right now to begin the application process of becoming a Jadestone client yourself. Once again, that's jadestonebranding.com/LMCC. This episode is also generously presented by a very special woman-owned and led all-natural hemp-derived THC-infused seltzer brand called Happi. The team and I love this brand, and their packaging is amazing. Their incredible award-winning flavors are all made with real fruit juice, 0% alcohol, and most importantly, are low dose. And they've created a special promo just for our LMCC community. Visit happyhourdrink.com. Happy is spelled with an I. happyhourdrink.com and use code LMCC20 for 20% off at checkout. Once again, that's happyhourdrink.com and use code LMCC20 for 20% off at checkout. The code expires soon. You can also find the code in our show notes. And stay tuned for our next episode where I get to talk to two amazing guests at the forefront of modern wellness that you most certainly will all know. In the meantime, to sponsor our podcast, drop us a line at sponsor@lmccshow.com and follow us on Instagram at LMCCshow and visit lmccshow.com to add yourself to our global waitlist for an opportunity to attend one of our upcoming award-winning in-person events. See you next time.